Expected to make it, so
Logical Raptors fanatic.
shoot trying to miss. Like every shot
Logical Raptors fanatic.
try to make it, so I was gonna act surprised.
A fun guy. Obviously,
Logical Raptors fanatic.
love the game of basketball. I mean, it's just more questions you have to ask me in order for me to tell you about.
Logical Raptors fanatic.
I just can't give you a whole spiel. I don't even know where you're sitting at.
Salute, real ones. It's Mike G back here with Logical Raptors fanatic. Um, hopefully that intro it's a work in progress. We'll keep moving on though. The value of the Raptors two-way contracts part 2 coming up. If you haven't checked out part 1, I suggest it's going to be vital that you check out part 1 first. And then if you want to kind of have the story after the two-way years more defined and what kind of stuff that's being looked for after the two-way year, you can go check out my Raptors developing value the success of Chris Boucher. All right, so let's dive in deeper. Enjoy. So I'm not going to do like a recap. I'm just going to go right into it, and then I'll refer to what needs to be referred to from part 1. So obviously we ended off with Chris Boucher. After the championship year, we talked about how he kind of is the revolutionary mold for the next couple of years. So let's check out the next year, which is the run it back year, a really great special team. All right, so the two-way contracts for the run it back year of 2019-2020 were O'Shea Brissett and Paul Watson Jr. Okay, I think you need to understand. I guess I'm going to introduce a concept called the cupboard. So obviously, in the bottom, you have 3 levels in the cupboard, right? And reachability matters. So the things you use every day that are the best, you're going to have at the bottom shelf, easy to reach, right? And then in the second kind of shelf, you're going to have your kind of every so often, but once a week kind of meals like pasta sauces and stuff. Bottom shelf's more like breakfast cereals, oatmeals, different things that you use each every day. And then at the very top shelf, the unreachable stuff. That's kind of like the weird bean stuff that you might use once in a blue moon, right? So in the championship year, we basically traded a bunch of different assets from each parts of the shelves, right? So we trade a bunch of middle shelf assets and a bottom shelf asset in JV and got Marc Gasol. So we consolidated talent, like the kind of theory of what I was explaining in my roadmap video. Obviously, I didn't title the I didn't title it properly, so that kind of got lost in the mix, I think, with people thinking it was a season preview and not necessarily a kind of a a temperature check on where we are in the championship progress, the progress kind of road towards a championship, and looking back at our first kind of road to the championship and kind of maybe seeing if we can kind of take where we are now and then plot it on the same uh, progression point, and then look at the future setbacks for the progress part we're in right now, right? So it's really interesting, but okay, back to the original point at hand, I think you need to consolidate talent to win in the playoffs. And getting a seed in the regular season is more about extending that talent over the bench because injuries happen, a longer time frame, and you need guys to fill in, right? So, okay. So we traded some of our filling guys from the middle shelf and some of our deep guys, whatever, you know what I mean? There was a couple guys that went out in the Kawhi trade as well. So we started seeing the cupboards empty a bit so we could load that bottom shelf to win the championship. And that's what matters ultimately. So we made our moves, but now we have to scale back. We lost two starters in Kawhi and Danny Green right off the bat, right after the championship. We lost two starters. So now we have to take kind of two bench players and move them up to starter. So that was OG and Fred Van Vliet, which got moved up to starters. But then that thins out our bench, right? So that's where I think Chris Boucher kind of got some spot minutes, but our bench was very thin at that point. So what we did in the offseason when we lost Kawhi, we ended up signing Stanley Johnson on the biannual exception, which I didn't actually mention in my extension series, but it's a type of mid-level exception type deal. And we picked up Rondé Hollis Jefferson also on the MLE. So we kind of picked up two kind of top shelf guys for our medium shelf. And that creates a little bit of an issue, obviously, in the regular season. But I think Nick obviously proved his coaching prowess this year and really kind of solidified himself as a great coach that can be able to work with any type of talent, not needing a superstar talent to necessarily win in this league, right? So back to the point of we also signed Matt Thomas and Terrence Davis too to guaranteed contracts. So those guys would have normally probably took in the two-way slots, right? But now we're like thinner on depth, so everyone gets moved down a shelf, right? Everyone, some of the top shelf ingredients got moved down, and we brought in some more exotic stuff for the top shelf, right? In Terrence Davis too and Matt Thomas. Outside prospects, obviously, I'm not going to go into them too deep into this video, but you can understand how the roster was forming out. So these two-way spots were even deeper positions than years previous because of the kind of talent exodus where we have to kind of start to remold younger, right? We have to go younger. So, okay, let's get into the actual two-way guys here once we kind of got the lay of the land, because I think we are talking about two-way value and asking the question, do the Raptors have the best two-way value from a player's eyes? But I also want to kind of touch on the answer of two-way value for the Raptors as a team. And being an extension of the bigger club and what the bigger club needs is a big factor in the two ways and the 905. Great organization, by the way, 905. But it's about helping the bigger club. So it's not necessarily always about the 905 as its own standalone team. You're not looking to like build a championship team and have main guys. You're looking to have kind of role players play a bigger role that you could see maybe one day they can do that in the NBA over a number of years, learning different methods, see if they're effective on a smaller level, and then try to scale it up and see what plays out in the NBA, better or for worse, right? So okay, let's get back into it. O'Shea Brissett, age 21, the first season. So I think after Chris Boucher, we thought of kind of, hey, let's bring in a younger Canadian and see if we can get that same kind of like great development, because Chris Boucher wants to be here so bad, so he works even harder, right? The Raptors effect video kind of was a part of what I meant by laying down groundwork. So I laid down the groundwork of the relationship between Canadian players and this Canadian team, the Toronto Raptors. Then I laid out using that kind of passion as the context of how hard and why Chris Boucher's worked so hard in his life to be a Raptor. And now that we've kind of set the revelation and the precedent for our two-way kind of recipe mold, we can look now and compare that recipe mold and how it's adapted over time, and also kind of what successes we've had with that particular mold. So I think we are starting to see a kind of shift to go younger in that mold, because I think with younger players, they have more options, right? If you're a talented younger player, you have way more options. I think Chris Boucher, as an older player, was looking at very limited options. That's why the low side, high chance making it really mattered, because I think his age, right? His age kind of started to factor him out of team's abilities to be able to develop him in time to get him up to speed enough where you have enough return on that development, right? And I think the Raptors understand that they can kind of develop way faster than other teams. So we can take later prospects and get extended value like Van Vliet or Chris Boucher, which we're seeing now. But let's continue. So as a younger player, obviously he didn't touch the like the G League, so his pre-rap stats are from college. So let's go through them. NCAA, Syracuse, pretty high-profile team. So it's not like he was playing at like a random team, right? So 34 games, 33 minutes. Sounds like kind of like a starter, kind of big minutes. All right. 11 field goal attempts, 3.3 three-point attempts. Uh, oof, that's not looking great though, not gonna lie. Field goal percentage 393, 3-point percent 270. He has promise. It was better than Chris Boucher's coming from the, the Santa Cruz Warriors to us. So I think when we look at prospects, we don't really focus in on like we're looking at the raw prospect of the like his raw features, right? His length, his motor, his character, all those type of things, but we also want some kind of pre-programmed kind of sporting knowledge and ability to kind of have sporting IQ, understanding the game and kind of the nuances of competition, right? But I think individual skills, we look at them as indicators, but I think you're seeing now a more shift where we believe we can build the shooters, and you won't see the prospects as much with higher stats. But look, 7.5 rebounds, 1.8 assists, steals, blocks, looks good. So like a defender, kind of like forward, like a tweener, versatile kind of, not great at scoring yet, but I think he shows promise. 12.4. Uh, so it's really interesting. All right. But he's a Canadian guy, so I think we've been looking at him for a while. Maybe that year wasn't indicative of his whole story, but I think it's really important to really get down to the bare numbers. We can't give merit points in this business because the NBA is a serious business, and the result of winning matters most above anything else, right? So I think even though sometimes there are players with great stories and we get so invested, it is so heartbreaking to see them kind of not continue with us. We do have to look at it with a clear, logical, just mindset, right? So, okay, let's go on to his two-way contract, though. Let's see what happened here. So, 2019, 2020, this was actually the G League bubble, because this was the bubble year, right? Run it back. We were doing so great up until March, and then the stoppage, and then everyone knows I'm not going to get into it right here now, but so the the not no or the G League didn't actually start up that whole season, I don't think, and they were actually playing in the bubble. They actually moved into the bubble after the players and played out their kind of season there, I think. Well, I think there was part season started and then they continued it like the playoffs and whatnot. So okay, because similar to the bubble format, right, of the NBA. So games played, 30 minutes played. So we cut down his minutes a little bit, right? Gave him another field goal attempt, increased his threes. So we increased his threes. We tried to mold him into something we saw, right? So, okay, 4.15. So he's shown a slight improvement. I wouldn't say that's too much of an improvement, though. And then in three-pointer with more volume, he kind of clicked back. But I think he's probably progressing in that maybe a little bit, right? Ribs, uh, 6.5, so less. I think it's hard to say. It's hard to say, O'Shea Brissett, because I think he was so raw at that point. We didn't necessarily know what we were molding him into. I think he's a small forward, like power forward kind of tweener. Because you have to look at what we kind of lost. We lost to Kawhi. We were thinner in the power forward position, right? So we are looking at the future of kind of bringing up a next forward, which Scotty and Precious became now, but we're still looking back here, right? So his steals and blocks look like they've kind of maintained, and then he looks like he's increased. So he kind of like stabilized within those 2 seasons. I think he's really young, so 21 years old. You got to look at those stats. They're not super spectacular, but I think his hustle and his want and his character really signaled to Masai in the front office that, hey, his stats right now might not show the full story because this guy has an edge on the other guys that grow if he has an edge like ego. There's this like thing. I'm gonna explain it later. Don't worry. We'll get more into it. But let's get into his post Raptors. Because I think this is a really interesting story with Chris Boucher. Because we didn't see these great pop in numbers. So I think ultimately Masai made tough decision. And I think it's really in hindsight now that we look back at it, maybe we made a mistake on this. So I think this decision right here could shape some of the future decisions. Like I think there was a key mistake here I think made, but it's hard to tell. See, you can't fault Masai because you've seen the other kind of well, you'll see with more metrics, but you've seen with Chris Boucher what kind of stuff they're looking for, right? And the kind of performances we got from other players. But you need to remember that age matters. So it's harder to gauge these with a younger player, right? You can be completely wrong, or you can be completely right, or somewhere in the middle. It's hard to tell with younger players. With older players, it's kind of a bit easier to see their path because it starts to close doors through age of ability and what kind of role they can progress into, right? So November 28th to 2020. So we signed him to a multi-year contract. I think we kind of he subbed in quick for a game and really showed an impressive ability to make a difference in the game. He grabbed a couple key rebounds. He was in the paint fighting, playing D, getting a couple foul calls and stuff like that. He showed promise. He showed compete. He showed this kind of like edge. Well, we'll get into it, but this is where the mistake happened, where he saw, as we're going to talk about in our other prospect, Paul Watson Jr., we're going to see what happened in correlation with both of them because they they are in part one story. So, but we waived him, okay, December 19th, put the pin in that date, right? And Indiana Pacers kind of picked him up, brought him to their G League for 1 year. They got really thin around the COVID year. So this is the next COVID year, our Tampa year, pretty much. And he came on with them, right? And now he's signed a minimum deal, 2 years. And I was watching Indiana preview, and they actually had him prominently featured in that preview. So I think he's showing some stats. He had some like 18 and like some crazy like points and rebounds games. He's really developed, and he still has respect for our Raptors. He says that he appreciates the time that he was here and what he learned when he was here, even though it was a extremely short time. It's just that's the way things go sometimes. You know what I mean? That's just the way it is. And I think Masai says, "Man, I made a mistake on a O'Shea Brissett," and he understands the kind of mistake and the projection that O'Shea Brissett has kind of made, and he's kind of made that jump to NBA player, where our next guy hasn't. So it's really interesting what's kind of happened with him. So he's definitely a piece of that success, and I think him touting the respect increases the player site value. So they see that the Raptors two-way contracts, even if you don't make it with the Raptors, still have great patina afterwards. Because like if Masai's interested in you, you probably have something that he sees. So something tangible, an NBA player. Masai's usually right. So I think other teams kind of see that and kind of look for Masai guys, right? So let's get on to what actually the second part of this year's story in Paul Watson Jr. We got him a bit later, so age 25, a more experienced prospect. He played with the Westchester Knicks, um, 50 games, so that was a regular kind of G League season, obviously, the championship year, so there was no stoppage. 30 minutes per game. Meh. Similar, but like, yeah, you can understand. Uh, Field goal attempts 7, 3-point attempts at 3, field goal average at 4.39, 3-point percentage at 3.45. So like he has a decent, just under league average on 3 volume or a 3 volume of 3, which is and is looking like he could still score around the basket. I think Paul Watson Jr. is an extremely interesting prospect with extended wing length. Man, this guy has like a crazy reach. And I think after Boucher and kind of Siakam really popped in the championship year, Masai, I think, was like, we have to go in this direction of guys with plus wing length. And he's seen how well and how effective Siakam was. And he was probably like, let's get 5 Siakams, or let's get 4 Siakams and a Kawhi, or like, you know what I mean? Some kind of configuration of Kawhi and Siakam. He wants that kind of Jordan Pippen kind of combination. He sees that. He's a student in basketball and kind of formulates his plans based on the Spurs and the Bulls, I think, and the Lakers, like the dynasties. I think he really looks at the dynasties and kind of tries to pick up ideas from there. And I think if you want pre-Masai, like what he's done with us and his kind of idea generation, I think a lot of ideas you can see that they're kind of simulating from those dynasties. But okay, let's continue though. So age 25, a bit older, yeah. We went through this. Okay. So field goal under 3. Maybe we could have tweaked his shot and stuff, but his length and stuff is really impressive. So as a guard, 4.8 rebounds, nice. Wasn't really much of a playmaker, so maybe like more of a shooting guard, like small forward kind of guy. But steals 0.8, blocks 0.5, points 8.2. So obviously he wasn't being used correctly. I think you could see the bare bones of a great player in a sense, like a prospect. 25, a bit older, but I think he has his length and his size, like we were talking about. Sometimes size can trump age. if you're such a unique talent and have unique gifts, your age might not matter in the context of the player you are, because your gifts are a complete mismatch for regular type of formed players at those positions that ultimately you can be effective without really anything, right? And I think he started to look at for those oddity kind of players that have those advantages in size that don't really need any skills to overmatch another person because of the way the game of basketball is played on defense, offense, and rebounding. Length and size it matter extreme importance, right? So let's look at his two-way year. So bubble thing again, right? 30 games. Played a lot more minutes. So obviously he was looked at and more leaned upon as a more experienced guy at 25 than O'Shea Bissett at 21. So field goal attempts 14.2. So we increased his volume like crazy, right? We're like, this guy has the bare bones. He has a great shot length, right? Increased up his attempts, increased up his threes, and look at this. Wow. 495, great for a guard, right? And then 3-point percent, 4, 2, 3. That's that's the jump. That's what they're looking for, right? That's the mold. That's what they're looking for, right? Rebounds 6.5, so he even increased those. And like similar minutes. So obviously he just wasn't being used right. So it wasn't about like minutes and opportunity. It was about the way he was being used. And I think sometimes that plays into the pre numbers too as well. So you have to kind of understand the player a little bit more. But okay, let's continue. So another assist. So he had the ball in his hands more, shooting more. So obviously the defense is going to collapse more on him. Then he's going to pass out when there's open guys, right? So up this steals a bit, up this blocks a bit. Wow, nice. Took his points up more than double, right? That's see the Knicks way versus the Raptors way. That's how you take guys and utilize their gifts properly. We obviously have a coaching staff that knows how to take guys and really put them in positions to win, right? So okay, post 2A. Okay, so this is where the story connects, right? So December 19th, converted his two-way 2 years. So we waived O'Shea Brissett. So we signed him to a contract, and then we waived him like a month later, right? To put, I think that's where the mistake was made. We were looking at a more polished person that could fill in the playoffs, and that didn't even come into play. So we waived the better prospect for a guy that sat on the bench pretty much, right? So we ended up waiving him anyways the next year. Well, he played some of the Tampa year, but obviously just wasn't. I don't think he has that edge, like that take it edge. Some guys need that kind of I'm gonna take it. And now he's on the OKC Thunder two-way. Obviously, we talked about the patina. But okay, let's get on to the next year. We kind of sat in this one a little bit, but it was good to kind of lay the groundwork of after the championship. So let's continue on now. All right, so now we're on to 2020, 2021 Raptors two ways. And this was the Tampa year. And actually, we didn't have a G League team. We didn't field one in the Tampa year because I think the relationship between locale is the important part. And I think operating expenses were going to balloon that year anyways. So I think they were trying to combat some of that. Franchise relocation is extremely expensive. Having to outfit gyms and workout places and do all that kind of stuff, right? So I think we didn't field the G League team. So I think this year's stats are obviously the Raptors. And during the COVID year, they definitely got minutes. So I think it was a different type of year. So we'll use like the Toronto stats for this year. So we got Utah Watanabe. Shout out. I still love him. He's still a great guy. Salute Japan. Japan's a great like kind of place. They really supported him and really supported us as a Raptors team. I think this is also part of Masai's global expansion. Hint drop on a future video. I know I keep hint dropping that one, but I think there's a lot of groundwork to understand what Masai sees, and we still have to kind of dive through that context. Similar with the Chris Boucher timeline, we got to lay down some groundwork. But that was a great part of that year, and I think he's a really inspirational guy for his country and has really grown from being in the Raptor system. And I think this also adds to the what players see, right? Players see guys come in and get better, right? That's the whole point of the Raptors' two-way value and what the players see. So when Ron Harper Jr. harping back to part one, when he said he believes the Raptors have the best two-way contracts in the league, he meant from a growth standpoint. That's why I added the insert before that comment, because he was talking in the context of development and moving forward. It's about progressing, climbing that NBA ladder, Chris Boucher style, and getting paid, taking care of your family, helping your community, and being an inspiration for others that have been in your place, that they can make their dreams possible. Maybe not NBA dreams or something specific, but maybe a career goal, work wise. So I think it's really great the kind of culture that Messiahs is built, and culture in the sense of people, a group of people that care about the same type of things. That's what I think I mean when I'm saying that type of culture, not like basketball culture, but actual real culture of an organization, how the people in the organization feel, believe, and are as people in real world. Because people, a player as a person probably matters first, in my opinion. When you're investing so much money and development hours into these prospects, I think you need them to have a certain type of character to rely on the metrics. That's an important part. And I think when we say we're looking for a Raptors guy, it's about character, not skipping steps, believing in hard work, believing in together, family. You know what I mean? Those principles that are preached and are on the backdrop. Great backdrop for this year, by the way. Every child matters. I believe that as well. Children should be protected and nurtured because they are the future, right? So let's continue on with Utah, obviously a bit older, but in the Tampa year, we were looking, we were thin. Another exodus of players in Gasol and Ibaka left, and we picked up a bunch of other centers. We let Rondé Hollis Jefferson leave, and we picked up Bembury. We still had Stanley. We converted O'Shea, and we still had Paul Watson Jr., right? So I think we had one spot available, so we waived O'Shea, converted Paul Watson Jr., and then got Utah on the two-way, right? It was later in that year, right? We got Utah, so let's look at his I guess Memphis G League stats, because I think he was still trying to become an NBA player, and I think the G League stats were indicative of where he was playing in the Memphis rotation. So 22 games, 32 minutes, 32.7 minutes exact. Field goal attempts, 12.5. 3-point attempts, 4. Field goal average, 5.42. So not like decent, you know what I mean? Decent. And 3-point percentage, .364, so above average. So he looks like a decent scorer, kind of like he has an ability to shoot and stuff, right? Rebounds 5.8, assists 2.1, steals 0.9, blocks 1.0, 17.2 points. So he looks like a great all-around player, like a fill-in player, plays D, right? Rebounds, plays within the team, makes his shots. So I think that was a great prospect and a pickup that they saw, right? Maybe they saw something in his game, or he wasn't being utilized properly, or Memphis just had way too many young guys at that point. And I think their age bubble was different at that point because they were looking at Jaw and they got Bane in this year. I know people want to harken back and downgrade Masai for the Bane thing, but who would you rather have, Baines or Precious, or like Baines and OG? Because that's the position he plays. And I think ultimately, if we wanted just a 3 and D guy, maybe Baines becomes more, right? But ultimately, if we wanted a 3 and D guy like that, we have those guys. We can build those guys. I think we were looking at a different issue that year with the point guard issue, and maybe trying. We had one final year of Lowry and Van Vliet's knowledge and mentorship still on that team. So I think it was really key to try to maybe lock in on a point guard, and using a higher pick gets a better base talent. So you look for those characters and you look for that base talent. And then now, instead of having an undrafted guy, we have a guy like a first round prospect in that same mold type, maybe hitting above all star where Van Vliet's hit. So that's what the mold is about. It shifts age wise, and we try to apply it to a younger guy or older guy, and we apply it in different situations. So it's really important to understand the context around age and recipe and what we've kind of done with players past tense, right? And that shapes how we go forward with our players in the future. That's why I think my channel, I want to harken on that point of what Masai's done in the past, because we can really tell what he's going to do forward. And I think that's a great aspect and a piece of just being a voice in the Raptors community with creators, a bunch of great creators I respect, and just being part of that, adding my little bit here by looking at the past and kind of applying it to the future. And all my videos are kind of really indicative of that, right? So the season preview wasn't actually a preview of this season. It was more, let's look back at where I think the team at a similar point was on the point before with the Lowry era, and compare it to the Fred Van Vliet Pascal era, right? And we'll match up where we think on the timeline, right? And see what forward pitfalls, because we can look at the past, what Masai's done before, and somewhat have an idea of what he's going to do forward, right? There's always mistakes and different decisions Masai always sees. Maybe he's noticed something that someone else hasn't noticed, and until he does it, I can't really analyze it, right? So, but let's get back to it. So he had decent stats for the Memphis hustle, so we picked him up when we were kind of fit in the Tampa year, obviously Exodus, yeah. So 50 games played, 14.5 minutes. So normally a guy that just came out of like the G League, we wouldn't pop him with that much minutes. But I think COVID was crazy that year, and we were trying to fill in where we could. So this is you got to understand, this is probably more after two-way kind of type of stats where we're looking at. We knew that we had to kind of get a more polished guy, so we looked at maybe this was as his two-way Raptors year, and this is the next year, and then that's how we were looking at engaging the statistics. Like I said, if you want more of that kind of end of it, you could see what kind of Chris Boucher went through. I go through his stats real deep and stuff. So, all right. So 50 games play at 14.5 minutes. Okay. So field goal attempts 3.6. So a fraction, a fourth of it, right? And then like half the three. So we want to use them as more 3D, a glue guy, a connector piece, 4.39, and a great clip, right? 400. And I think that's obviously indicative of the chance he got with us, right? In our next year, but we'll continue on and then get to that part. Ribs, 3.2. Obviously less minutes, less ribs, yeah. Assists, less, yeah. Steals though. See, he was playing more defense, right? Less minutes, but more steals. So obviously he was showing some more 3-and-D pop. And that's what we were looking for at that to fill that role with a bit of playmaking, ability to rebound, all around kind of guy. And then blocks 04, which is decent compared to if you're looking at half the stats and like half the block. Yeah, that's probably appropriate points. Obviously, he wasn't shooting the ball much, but that looks okay, I guess. You know what I mean? We were looking at different metrics. He was obviously in a different role. This was more of his complete role of like full out going, and that's what the metric we were looking at to compare, right? But so we converted his 2-year two-way around the end of the Tampa year, right? But then obviously he didn't do well in our return season where his three ball was off. There was a whole bunch of issues with him. I think we saw the limitations of his role with us. So we had to do it. We had to waive him this summer in 2022, just for reference for future views. That's what this is when this videos came out after this summer, and the Nets kind of picked him up, where I think he'll get some decent minutes because they're thin after trading to consolidate. Like I said, they're in the same problem that we were in the run it back season, right? So the cupboards are bare. They're trying to shift cupboards, move down guys, and all that kind of stuff. So, all right, let's get on to Jalen Harris. An interesting one. Our first pick to sign a two-way. And I think this was just a tester, 59th pick, right? You know what I mean? Like pretty much undrafted, just dibs on the first undrafted guy. So age 22, first season with us. So we'll look at his college stats. Obviously, we got him out of the draft, pick 59, right? So he played with Nevada. So 30 games, 33 minutes, 16.7 field goal attempts, 3-point attempts at 6.2, field goal average 4.46, 3-point average 3.62. So it looks like he's a decent shooting guard, can hit volume and stay consistent with a clip in college with a shorter 3-point line. And you always got to remember that from the college stats, the 3-point line shorter, where the G League line is fine, right? So ribs 6.5. So he's a little bit of more than a guard, so he can rebound, he can play make a bit, right? And he plays defense, right? That's and 21.7. Yeah, okay. Okay. He looks like a decent prospect, like from all accounts, pretty young, got solid shooting, like some rebound chops, assists, right? So, but I think when we brought him in, see, okay, when you're when you have less talent options, like when you're searching the bottom of the barrel, character kind of gets thrown back a little bit, and you might bring in some more questionable guys that don't actually fit with the culture, like I said with Utah. And I think Jalen Harris, obviously, we're going to get into it, but maybe I don't think he showed enough in practices and stuff because I think his minutes were clearly down. Games played 13, minutes played 13.2. got more of a chance, but Utah got real minutes, right? He got real minutes with the starters and stuff. I think this was overbalanced from the tanking part of the season, right? We went into the Tampa tank mode, and Jalen got some minutes. He started getting minutes, right? So 5.5 attempts, 3-point attempts, 2.8, 50, not bad. Like for a guard, that's not bad, right? And then a 3-point, wow, okay, yeah. So he can shoot, right? So ribs, obviously less. NBA players are bigger, faster, better, right? Assist, so he was more of like a finishing piece in where he was playing. Steals, blocks wasn't existent in college anyways. So I think some of the things translated 7.4, but I think this is where the problem hit, right? He showed a lot of interesting aspects in his game, but I think the question of character came in, and I think we had two guys kind of questionable character and more guys at the beginning of the year. We kind of cut them, and then we kind of phased out the other guys with the bad attitudes. See, that's the problem when you kind of have the talent drain. You have to bring in guys that maybe aren't your type of guys. And that's what Fred VanVleet said this year. We have more Raptors guys. It feels like Raptors guys that care about hard work in the gym rat type of style. Everyone's growing. And I think obviously you can see who got weeded out. And all right, so we'll continue. Suspended under the Controlled Substance Act for 1 year, couldn't play last year, had to go overseas. Wasn't that special overseas, I don't think. We waived his rights when he came back. Just wasn't a Raptors guy. Like, hey, we're a family organization. I think it's important for us to stand on what we say and really be what we say we are, because I think it's important for guys from the outside looking in that we are what we say we are, or else that could create a disconnect immediately right off the bat if they're like, oh, these guys are faking it half the time. They don't believe in the stuff, man. So, all right, let's move on though. I think we've had enough of the Tampa year, right? So now we come up to last year where it's the 2021 2022 season. So it's really interesting how we saw we used our pick the previous year and signed him to a two-way with Jalen Harris. So now we have a higher pick and we try a similar kind of style or different thing, you know what I mean? With a little bit a year younger, right? So let's look at his stats and compare maybe to Jalen Harris because of similarities, right? So Louisville, a known program, I guess, you know what I mean? Games played 19, minutes played 35, so obviously a key piece in that year's team. Field goal attempts 11.5, 3-point attempts 3-point attempts 4.4, sorry. Field goal attempts 411, 3-point sorry, field goal percentage, and then 3-point percentage at 386. So it looks like he's a shooter, kind of guard. We're looking for guards right now. We're thin on the guards, so we're looking to bring in more guards, right? Rebounds 5.8. So like a versatile guard that can rebound and make plays. So assists 3.2, and he can defend. So 1.1 with a 0.3 blocks, 12.6. So like a 3 and D kind of all around kind of guy. Size metrics, that kind of we start to move towards a project 6'8", so it's heavy, bigger size guys with plus wingspan. That's how we look at it now. We want the bigger prospects at those certain positions with plus wingspan always. So we're kind of gearing up and looking at specific molds. Now that we have the whole buffet open to us because the players in the league understand the value of coming to the Raptors. We have more selection and we can be more specific on the talent that we pick, right? And so now you're going to see a more kind of converging as we fill our cupboards up with Raptors guys. So they have the character, the size, the skills, you know what I mean? The base talent, obviously. And we're going to try to make kind of a uniformish kind of style where, because I think in defense, it's really key to understand that if you have 4 great defenders and 1 weak defender, that eliminates the 4 great defenders because average players can get a matchup with that weak defender and score at a superstar level, right? So that's the problem. You want to take superstars, make them all stars, and take everyone down a degree. But if you have a weak defender, a weaker offensive player can look better against them, right? So you need 5 guys that are on a string that understand the defense and there's no holes, right? And I think championship year, you kind of saw that. We were able to have that versatility with 2 different centers and have kind of like the short guards and the bigger guards and forwards off the bench and like different combinations of guys, right? So we got our G League back this year, obviously. So I think he got hurt though, which is an issue. Obviously, I think that's what ultimately kind of hit him, but let's go through it. Games played 23, minutes played 23.8, field goal attempts 10.5, 3-point attempts at 6.3, field goal percentage 407, and this is a problem, I think, ultimately where we didn't see the metrics, right? They have to hit the metrics that we seen with previous players that indicate growth metrics that can scale up to the NBA. And I think it's important when looking at prospects to see what they've done, and the body of work is really important. Like all the summer workout stuff is great and all that kind of stuff, but I think real in-game pressure, in-game speed, in-game kind of adjustments, these things matter more when the game's on the line, when there's like you can only truly grow when the game's on the line and you make mistakes and you learn, because I think it's more important. You attach a big loss to that mistake and it becomes more prominent in your memory, therefore pushes you more to fix that, right? So I think there's a combination of failure at big moments in order to grow. And I think a lot of Raptors tend to get stuck in the weeds a little bit with that, where we want these guys to fail early. So when it matters more, and sometimes they're going to fail in the moments that matter more early, but that will increase value for later. Like we've seen with Pascal. We used to be on him so hard for not being a closer, saying all kinds of stuff, but he grew through the issues of being a number 1, and you saw last night we faced Brooklyn in the second game of the season, of the current season 2022-2023, and Siakam had a 37-point triple-double. Great. He looked like the best player out there, not gonna lie, on the court with KD, Kyrie, and everyone on, you know what I mean? That whole Brooklyn team there. So I think it's important that they grow through mistakes and really kind of show the improvements on the other side, right? So maybe he hit adversity this year. Obviously, the line's different than college, but still, that metric doesn't look good for long-term kind of prospectness. Like, obviously, maybe he got limited out at that range, but maybe he can work on it, which I'll get into it. Hold on. Ribs 3.3, assists 2.3. So yeah, like a kind of guard, but like a little bit of playmaking, a bit, you know what I mean? Be able to move the ball, like in our ball movement system. Ribs, a couple ribs. Steals 0.7 a block. For blocks 0.4. So, like a defender a bit. His three dropped off with more volume, which is an issue because obviously you can see we increased his threes, but then he wasn't getting to the paint as much. I think his body type wasn't fully sized up and he wasn't able to get to the rack as efficiently as he did in college. So I think maybe he was settling more and then wasn't hitting his threes. That's what I think it sees from the stats. But we'll continue on. Obviously, post Raptors, he got waived the summer, right? And then we signed into a 905. So he'll still continue with the team, but I think obviously he didn't hit the certain metrics. So obviously he wasn't a two-way guy, or you'll see in our next guy, a guy that could get leveled up. I think maybe he also didn't show that edge, which we're going to go into now with Justin Champagnie, because I think the edge really matters in young guys. Like, I think that's the thing that propels them to like high level growth, like an edge, a chip on their shoulder. Like Fred Van Vliet came in with a chip on his shoulder, and his attitude has always been that similar. He's a little bit more humbler than Justin Champagnie for sure. And I think that endears him more with the Canadian people. And I think obviously Justin sunning people and stuff during interviews, I think that's a little too much. In the locker room, whatever, open gym, if they want to show Champagne sunning or talking about sunning someone, because I don't think he does much sunning, which is the funny part of the joke. When he says he suns Siakam, obviously he's nowhere near Siakam's level, but it's comical in a sense, and I think maybe he's playing a bit of a clown. But I think in game he has that edge, like that take it. He needs to take it. Like Lowry edge, Fred Van Vliet edge, and then obviously in my Rico Hines video, Rico was referring, well, in that interview, he was referring to Siakam becoming more like nasty. Not like a nasty person, but nasty on the court. Like, take it. I'm going to take this ball. I'm going to make it right now. And you could see it kind of translating to his game early in the season a little bit more. But I think Justin Champagnie, Fred Van Vliet, and Lowry kind of are guys that have been baked. Their whole careers have been kind of formed around that edge. And I think O'Shea Brissett kind of had that edge too. And I think Masai underestimated it and went for a more polished prospect that didn't have that kind of competitive edge, that battler mentality. Obviously, Chris Boucher's got that edge too, right? We're looking for those guys that kind of have a chip on their shoulder, but understand it's team first. And their chip is about rebounding, about defending, that they care about all aspects of the game. That's where that ego and chip translates to, right? That matters. It's not just about scoring and how many shots you got, right? I want to hear about how you brag about your defense or your rebounding and how you work on it. And like, obviously, if he gets shown up, he's gonna feel more demoralized from it. But I think as like a kind of tough New York cat, like a street guy, Brooklyn, a real Brooklyn, not the Brooklyn Nets, which are fake transplant Brooklyn guys, like a real Brooklyner, right? Justin Champagnie, he's got that the Lowry dog, the Fred Van Vliet dog. You know what I mean? So I think ultimately when he gets sunned by another player, I think he takes it maybe more internally and works even harder. Like haters fuel him, his own ego missteps fuel him. Like he doesn't want to look stupid again or something like that. And I think that's a really interesting aspect of a player where they'll put their neck out and get it chopped off sometimes, but putting that neck out promotes and increases more growth quicker and faster. When they have a chip on their shoulder and like, yeah, I can do that, and they jump in there and try to do that and start to learn the real intangibles about that kind of aspect and want to brag on that aspect of their game, that tool in their toolbox or that instrument that they can play, the harping back to the Nick Nurse kind of deep dive. Great story, but let's get into his actual statistics now. Champagny, we've talked about him as a person. I think everyone's familiar with his antics, but I think there's kind of a side to the antics that really translate well to ball, and I think maybe Canadians don't are missing on that disconnect there. So I kind of explained it out a little bit more to understand what's going on here. So Pitt, all right. So games played 20, minutes played 34.4, field goal attempts 14.1, 3-point attempts 3.7, field goal percent average 477, and 3-point average 311. So okay, so this is the interesting aspect about Champagny. I looked back at his history and he had 0 three ball before. Like, in literally 2, 3 years, he went from like a 20% 3-point shooter to what we're gonna see next year. But I think see that edge promotes quick development. And I think see his base skill is his fight, his determination, rebounding. That's his elite skill. He's kind of like a poor man's Rodman in a way, where he kind of has this knack for really out rebounding way bigger guys with his speed and kind of his IQ and intellect, and maybe his just natural ability to see the ball come off and know where it's going to go, or kind of, Rodman kind of explains in that kind of meme clip, but he's actually dropping valuable information in that meme clip where he's talking about he asks people to shoot the ball and he looks at how it comes off physics wise, like look at the spin and the force and what spot it hits on the wall or the rim, and then obviously the backboard or whatever, and he sees how that kind of the ball comes off and where it goes to, right? And that's trial and error studying. I'm a similar kind of guy. I like to try things out, look at the results, and then kind of use my own kind of base to kind of improve and look at different aspects, right? And that NOAA system, I think, is in part with the shooting component of that. But rebounding, it's a little bit different. So I don't know. Maybe they have a system like the Rodman system or something in some kind of organization somewhere. But obviously, that is proprietary information. They spend like uh, so much money developing these programs and these systems, and it's very proprietary. Trust me, they're not leaking out the best stuff. That NOAA system is just the tip of the iceberg. They can't show you the real all the kind of systems and metrics that they use over with the Raptors, because I think obviously that's a big component. And I want to drop a little knowledge bomb that that's the reason why Bobby Webster is our GM. People don't know too much about him, but he was actually being recruited by the CIA because he has an ability to see information and absorb information, categorize information, and then recall that information, right? So, like a spy can look at a room and know all these kind of different aspects and then be able to retell it afterwards, right? And then always have those references in their kind of thought frame. Like they don't just see it once and forget it. It kind of bakes into who they are. And I think I can see who Bobby is because I'm a similar person. But in the team building skills, you could see Bobby's like a crazy brain genius when it comes to numbers, stats, patterns, statistics, all that kind of stuff. And I think he's obviously the genius behind all of our kind of stuff here. And I'm just gratefully appreciative that he's with us, and Masai knows how to pick great talent, like the perfect guy for the position, the guy with the numbers, the guy with the kind of like the super brain, right? So okay, so we went through so his rebounding is his elite skill that will anchor him in the NBA, and I think it's about developing these other skills around him that will really kind of make him into a great player. I see his mold more as like a Danny Green, but better rebounding. So a Rodman rebounding Danny Green, right? But then he's more of a dog defender, so he can be primary pressure defender on guards, go 93 feet, full dog status, right? So assists 1.6, steals 1.2. See, he's a dog. He is a dog on defense. Blocks 1.3. Dog on defense. Points 18 points. So like he scores. He's a dog on defense. He rebounds. Like he's a great prospect, and I think a lot of teams were really looking at him, wanting to bring him in as an undrafted guy because he came out early in order to kind of put his foot in the NBA early than his brother, because his brother came out a year later, which is more appropriate. Most prospects come out at 21, right? But he came out a year earlier, and I think he wasn't fully ready for the other teams, but the Raptors kind of saw him and understood where he like Delano Banton came out a year early as well, but he's obviously a higher prospect in that kind of aspect of his capabilities and his unique skills, length, obviously, passing, vision, and elite speed up the court, right? So we have two different elite prospects coming out of this year's kind of bunch of our draft picks in a sense with Chris. It's tough though, man. Like these, and he really needs to show something this year. Like he needs to translate like Chris Boucher did. Like I think Nick Nurse did an interview at some point, right? Where he said that it's important for him to now be effective in those minutes he gets, right? Those 14, 13 minutes, maybe. He needs to be really effective and show a result on winning to kind of get that next level into the rotation, permanently into that rotation, right? So it's really interesting. So he's a great prospect coming out of college, right? A lot of people are interested in him. So we got him. He loved our culture. We were the kind of top choice on his list. He understood what we're about. I think he's an intelligent way about him. Like he's a street smart person. He can recognize real. Like that's Boucher can recognize real. Van Vliet can recognize real. This guy can recognize real as well. So games played. I think we had him up at the big club a lot too and stuff, you know what I mean? So games played lesser, 14 minutes played, high though, right? 35.9 field goal attempts, a lot more attempts than he was getting with the big club, right? So this is what we're looking for in a more expanded role from him, right? When we look at these G League stats, we want to try to get him up there in like 2, 3 years, we want to get these kind of production stats at the NBA level, right? So, okay. And we want to improve and enhance his best skills. So, rebounding and obviously now his three ball, but we'll get into it. Okay. So, field goal attempts 15.9, like I said. So, a bigger chance kind of in his 905 minutes. 3-point attempts 6.3. So, a decent amount. So let's cut it down. So 2/5, right? 2/5 of his shots were threes. So 4.89 for his general field goal percent average, which is decent for a guard, right? Higher than normal. I think 45 is kind of the standard for guards. But his 3-point percentage, wow, 409. So he he went from like a non-shooter, like a 200% shooter to a volume 3-point shooter within like a 2-3 year span, literally. And I think that's this is the stuff that matters. You got to identify the guys that can ability to take in information and grow quickly. Speed of development matters. We can do it over how many years? We can hold a guy for freaking 10 years and make him great with at the end of those 10 years, but now it's trying to conform that model into let's try to get to that point in less years, right? Let's take a 3-year project, make it a 2-year project. Let's try to enhance different aspects of the recipe and kind of shorten the the growth time to where they are a productive piece of the rotation, whether it be just a rotation piece or maybe they break higher. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to make starters from these fringe positions by developing through the years, and then you don't trade your assets. You're more enhancing your own assets, and every spot on the roster is an opportunity to have someone grow in that position and create more value. And I think that's the way Masai looks at our roster. Every position matters, every spot matters from a growth standpoint. We have and pay for a lot of money for one of the best development systems in the league. We pay a lot for the best coaches, the development coaches in the league, in Rico Hines and Earl Watts and everyone under the sun in between that helps with development, right? And we pay a lot of money. So we need to have, we need to be able to uh, utilize and impact that growth payment into results, tangible results, right? So, okay, so ribs, yeah, 8.3. Yeah, the NBA bodies are bigger and stuff. I think with age, he'll get bigger, stronger, but I think it obviously translate extremely well from a guard to have 8.3 rebounds from a guard that's kind of smaller than most forwards that can out rebound forwards, right? I think that's an elite skill, a matchup problem with other guards, clearly, and matchup problems with certain forward rebounders. And I think that's where he had an increased leg up on the other candidates from his age, obviously. He was 21 going into this year. And we're going to get more into the cutting and all that stuff. But let's continue on with the stats. So assists 1.5, steals 1.2, blocks 1.1. So you can obviously see his defense translated extremely well to the NBA level because I think that dog energy, he's like a dog on the pressure lead guard guy. You know what I mean? That kind of role. So 21 points during the regular season, but I don't think this is indicative of his true growth because even well, it's such a small sample size, 2 games, but he actually scored like 36 points in the playoffs, increased his averages from 3 and his volume from 3. He was shooting like 10 threes in the playoffs, and they were looking real formidable. I think if him, like Champagne and Bannon, won the G League championship, which was a very big possibility, but I think the one game, obviously, against Pat McCaw, a revenge for slandering Pat McCaw came back. And, well, it wasn't necessarily him. I think it was an inside presence. Reggie Perry was on a 10-day, and he was really effective for us throughout the year and a big presence in that big man spot. And I think we really missed him in that kind of playoff game, and we faltered. But I believe, in my own opinion, that if we had Reggie Perry on the team playing that game against Pat McCaw and stuff, that we would have gone on to the finals and then won the G League championship because I think Banton and Champagny are that kind of special. I think we want to really now attach them to each other like Fred Van Vliet and Siakam. So we have a Champagny edge with him, and then Banton's kind of a more natural talent like Siakam, less edgy and more like, so you could see the stylings of a new leadership group kind of a bit to help Scotty in the future if these guys stay around and continue to develop. But I think it's really important to continue with those growth metrics. Obviously, see with David Johnson here, if you don't hit 1 year, that's when I think your kind of position in the future kind of starts to get shaky, like Van Vliet, or sorry, Malachi Flynn, right? His position's kind of flaky. I see Dotwin actually being brought in this year in kind of a similar Chris Boucher mold, and see if we can take him in quicker time from Chris Boucher G League to Chris Boucher rotation. And we're looking to shorten that a year, right? So maybe in a year or two, we have him solidified in the rotation, right? And that's going to be Malachi's spot pretty much, where we're looking at where Malachi should have been already, pretty much, right? But I think obviously he's kind of had some setbacks with some injuries. And I think, I don't know, it's a really touchy situation with Malachi because we haven't seen enough from him. So I don't actually know where he's actually progressed, because I think those pro-am stuff is just it's not even really like, that's not even real kind of NBA talent level kind of game speed where it matters. Like your life, your NBA money's on the line, and you got to see when the pressure's on how they do, right? And that's where real growth is made. Pressure makes diamonds, right? So ultimately, with the cuts this year, I think they looked at the O'Shea Brissett mistake, and Champagne obviously wasn't no Brissett, where he actually hit on a lot of great metrics. He hit on so many metrics, and so I think he was even more above O'Shea Brissett in that scenario. So I think even though we're looking at a deep run this year, which we were looking at in the kind of the Tampa year when we were still thinking we could compete, right? But it was going to be a tough year either way. But I don't know. It was that was a whole crazy mess. But I think we picked a more polished prospect, looking at maybe whether we were going to actually make it there in the playoffs, and we made a mistake on that with not holding the better long-term prospect. And I think even Nick Nurse kind of mentioned that in his interview about making the team and stuff, about how we're not necessarily going to go with the guy with the best stats. We're going to look at also the guy that has the most growth upside. And I think that's obviously Champagny as our 15th man, as you can see right here. It's really interesting. After his two-way contract, we actually signed him up for 2 more years. So he was actually, this is Banton's final year of his contract, but Champagny had an extra year on top of this upcoming year, right? So in summer 2020, he's officially our 15th man. And I think he was the precipice of, well, the inspiration of this kind of little series. But it's going to be interesting to see going forward. Obviously, we don't have the future locked in, but I think from looking back at the other two ways, we can see that he's in a pretty good position right now, but he needs to translate to that next kind of deep bench role and start to show that, where Nick says, "Hey, Justin Champagny comes in, man. I swear he just gets a rebound, hits a three, he gets a steal." Like similar the way he talks about Chris Boucher, where he's like, "Oh man, he comes in, hits a three, gets a block, does the things that anchor him in the NBA," and I think contributes to winning, will obviously increase our, like, you have to look at now and in the future the way that the other players are going to look at Champagny, as Champagny looked at Boucher and O'Shea Brissett and all these other guys, right? And I think it's important to maybe come and be reflect on our own job and what we've done. Obviously, okay. So I'm gonna go into housekeeping. All right, no, guys. I know it's been a long one, but I think 2-way contracts and development and the kind of mission of my channel, development and stuff, you know what I mean, contracts and stuff, and understanding numbers and how they work into the kind of collective model we have here is really important. And two ways is a very key aspect of what we do here. And I think obviously it took more time to explain a lot of the different years and stuff, but I think ultimately when looking back in a couple years, there'll be a lot of treasure trove of information still in this video. And I think that's ultimately the aim of a lot of my videos, looking at kind of how they're looked at in time and still being valid in a forward kind of sense of the future. So we had a great one this time. I just want to shout out a couple people. Um, Definitely Raptors Freak Nation and Raptors Freak Lex. So many shout outs every day and stuff. I'm usually there like almost every day at like 9:30 a.m. Eastern. And a lot of diehard Raptors fans come for the game recap, the ref report. He has a little mascot matchup story, so a little bit of fun and jokes too. He reads every comment and really kind of engages in the context of your own comments. If you want to get your voice heard and just have like a sounding board for different ideas and stuff about the Raptors, and it's very Raptors focused, so it's a really good time. A lot of great people. I want to shout out everyone from that community that's kind of helped me get to this point and really still continues to support me. Obviously, you can tell with some great feedback on the last video, I really took that feedback in mind from G and Clinkstown and Tom Duke and everyone else that's kind of given me advice over this time frame and kind of worked it in and really taken it to heart and actually tried to adapt it. So if you want my content to kind of have a certain aspect or you think I could do something better, let me know, man. I'll actually listen and then apply that. You'll see that. You'll see it. So I want to salute G and Clinkstown or Grubstown, sorry. And I will also shout out Top Line Sports, Chris and Mrs. Sports Corner, great duo kind of have during the game streams. I'm usually hanging out there. So if you want to talk to me in either place or chat or like just have a good time just chilling out with Raptors people. I know obviously in real life it's hard to find Raptors friends and like people to kind of get to know and really feel like part of a community. And I think those places really get that community feel going. And I really enjoy both, and I'm part of both. So if you want to come over and be part of those communities, it's definitely welcome. They're both great people. And obviously, Mrs. Sports Corner is a great person as well. She's on the channel as well. Great thumbnail the other day where she's kind of like has the Raptors mask and stuff and kind of really representing us. And I think she's a great diehard Raptors fan. So respect to everyone, the real ones, salute real ones, logical Raptors fanatic, mic drop.